We're flexing for the thumbnail.
Oh, hi, natural face. Sup, you beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news, and we have a lot to talk about today. Big, small, weird, wild, a little bit of everything, so you just buckle up, hit that like button, and let's jump into it.
This is a news show.
New York Mayor Eric Adams was just slapped with 5 federal corruption-related charges, right? The man running America's largest city has just been indicted. And the details about these charges were laid out in the 57-page indictment that was just revealed as we were recording today's show. And it includes things like bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy, and soliciting campaign funds from foreign nationals. And on top of all that, his official residence got searched by investigators and his phone was once again taken, right? And these charges, they come after a months-long investigation into Adams, and they probably don't come as a complete surprise, especially because earlier this month, federal investigators executed search warrants and seized the phones of his top staff. And then even before then, there were hints that they were closing in on Adams, or they were executing search warrants on everyone close to him, and they even seized his phone this month. I mean, there were signs as far back as November of 2023, like when the home of his chief campaign fundraiser was raided. With that, then followed by a raid on one of the companies he's alleged to have illegally received money from. And according to the feds, Adams has been doing sketchy stuff for a while now, with the indictment stating, for nearly a decade, Adams sought and accepted improper valuable benefits, such as luxury international travel, including from wealthy foreign business people, and at least one Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over him, with Adams allegedly accepting the foreign money through so-called straw contributions, meaning that a Turkish official would send money to someone in the US who would then pass it off as their own donation to Adams. And in return, they seemingly got preferential treatment, such as when a new Turkish consulate was facing safety issues that prevented the fire marshal from approving the building, with Adams then allegedly threatening the inspector's job if the building wasn't approved. They also say that it wasn't just foreign influence either, with Adams also allegedly accepting corporate donations, which the indictment says is illegal. And there, it said that they used pretty much the same playbook. They'd give money to employees who would then pretend it was their own contribution to Adams. Then there's also the gifts that the feds claim Adams received. And according to the indictment, Adams tried to hide their value or make it seem like he paid for them. And in total, their value is over $100,000. And obviously, there's a lot more in the 57 pages. So I'm not gonna be able to get to everything, though I'll link to the document in the description. But as you can probably imagine, this has elicited many, many different reactions. I mean, even since yesterday, it was clear that charges were gonna be brought, and Adams has been defiant, saying yesterday,
I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target, and a target I became. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength in my spirit.
And when asked if he would resign, he answered, I'm stepping up, not stepping down. And today was not much different, with his attorney bashing how things went down this morning and saying, federal agents appeared this morning at Gracie Mansion in an effort to create a spectacle again and take Mayor Adams's phone again. He has not been arrested and looks forward to his day in court. They sent a dozen agents to pick up a phone when we would have happily turned it in. Also with this, I'll say I've seen some confusion regarding the lack of an arrest. But with that, I'll say that's not uncommon in these cases. For example, Senator Bob Menendez is allowed to be free while he awaits sentencing for almost identical charges. So we might see something similar for Adams. Though in the meantime, we have already seen a lot of fallout. Tons of high-ranking city officials have already resigned, such as the police commissioner, the city's top lawyer, and the school's chancellor, all of which led to calls for Adams to resign, such as from New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who wrote on Twitter, I do not see how Mayor Adams can continue governing New York City. The flood of resignations and vacancies are threatening government function. Non-stop investigations will make it impossible to recruit and retain a qualified administration. For the good of the city, he should resign. With many saying that her calls for a resignation, that's actually pretty notable because while she broadly opposes Adams for being too centrist, she actually rarely talks about New York City politics. But for now, like, the big question is, what's gonna happen with him? Is he gonna actually continue to refuse a resignation, or is Governor Kathy Hochul going to force him out of office? Which notably is something she actually has the power to do, though as of recording, she hasn't commented one way or the other. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because yes, innocent until proven guilty. And Adams is very adamant that these are all BS charges. But there is a reason that the feds almost literally never lose a case. They almost never bring charges without just a fucking mountain of evidence. So yeah, we will see, but for Adams, it does not look good. Then, shifting gears in online drama / business news, Dr. Disrespect wants his YouTube monetization back. Because as you might remember, he lost it back in June amid reports that he inappropriately messaged a minor over on Twitch, something that he essentially admitted to in a now deleted tweet, though he still claims there was nothing illegal happening, with him then taking a break from streaming, but he made his return a few weeks ago. And now that he's been back and consistently getting hundreds of thousands of people tuning into those streams, he tweeted a screenshot showing that he reapplied for YouTube monetization, with that showing that a decision would likely come in around a month. And all of this happening his analytics group Streams Charts found that as of mid-September, he is the second most watched YouTube gaming streamer in the US this year. Right? He's only behind iShowSpeed. And this is now some reports are saying he's even eyeing a potential return to the Midnight Society studio that he co-founded. And while right now it's unclear if anything's going to come from that, between that and his application for monetization, it seems like he's really launched a full-fledged comeback. But for now, we'll have to wait to see what happens next. And in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, in another quick piece of news on the note of backlash, let's talk about Margot Robbie, Jacob Elordi, and Emerald Fennell, because they are the center of some good old-fashioned casting backlash right now. With earlier this week, it being announced that Margot and Jacob were cast as the leads in Emerald's adaptation of Wuthering Heights, which is a book that you may have read or read the spark notes of in high school. And with that, you had a lot of people pissed off because Jacob is playing the character Heathcliff, who the book refers to as dark-skinned and has various other indicators that the character is not white. And so with that, you have people saying things like his experiences as a man of color influence his entire character and story as a man suffering racist abuse from his adoptive family. Fuck off, Emerald Fennell. As well as, did anyone actually read the book before deciding this? And while some have noted that this is far from the first time Wuthering Heights has been adapted into a film and many white actors like Tom Hardy have played the role of Heathcliff, many say they just believe that times are different now and there is a newfound cultural responsibility in casting these parts. And others saying this just shows that Hollywood is hypocritical because studios always pledge to have diverse casts, but we still end up with situations like this. Though this also, as some have given grace, noting Emerald Fennell is a director who always has a big take, right? Her swings are pretty big, and we don't know what her version of this story is going to be or how she's going to change it. And so actually with that, you have the BBC noting that we don't know what is up her sleeve, but still, quote, there is no doubt that at first glance, the casting seems fundamentally egregiously wrong. It has that mind-boggling, what were they thinking quality, which brings to mind a crass producer in a Hollywood satire barking, Wuthering Heights is drab, let's get Barbie and Elvis to play Kathy and Heathcliff. And well, of course, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts on everything we cover. For this one, I'd really love to know what my literature or film lovers out there are thinking about this. And then, this is so weird. We need to talk about how a Kentucky sheriff is accused of murdering a district judge in his chambers and no one knows why. Right? I mean, this whole situation has been this total mystery, confounding and rattling this small Appalachian town of Whitesburg. While many of the details are still unclear, what we do know is that Letcher County Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins has been accused of shooting Judge Kevin Mullins multiple times at the courthouse last Thursday. But since then, very little information has actually come out. But according to Kentucky State Police, the shooting happened after the two men had an argument, but the nature of that argument's unclear. We also saw local outlets reporting that Steins had allegedly walked into the judge's outer chamber where he told employees and others gathered there that he needed to talk to Mullins alone, with the two then going into the judge's inner office, closing the door, and those outside reporting that they heard shots. And after that, Steins just walked out with his hands up and surrendered to authorities who arrested him without incident and later charged him with first-degree murder. But then in his first court appearance yesterday, Steins pleaded not guilty. So while the investigation's still ongoing, that's pretty much all we know right now. Right? Law enforcement officials have not yet publicly confirmed a motive, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious one. Reportedly, Steins and Mullins were colleagues who had worked together in various capacities. Like before Steins was elected as sheriff in 2018, he served as Mullins' courtroom bailiff. And then as the county's top-ranking law enforcement officer, he's been responsible for providing security at courthouses, including for judges. Hell, he even had the county's circuit court clerk telling reporters they saw the two men heading to lunch together just hours before the shooting, and adding that he had worked with both of them for years and thought they were all friends. Now, all that said, notably here, in addition to the murder charge, Steins is also the subject of a separate federal lawsuit against a former deputy named Ben Fields, who served as Mullins' bailiff after Steins. And specifically, that suit alleges that Fields forced a woman to have sex with him in Mullins' chambers in exchange for keeping her out of jail when she couldn't afford to pay fees for her ankle monitor, with a woman claiming that Fields took her to Mullins' chambers because there were no cameras in there, with then eventually Fields being fired, pleading guilty to multiple charges, and serving time in jail. And while for Mullins, he was not named in the suit, which also didn't say he was aware or alleged that he was involved in any wrongdoing, the complaint did accuse Steins of failing to, quote, adequately train and supervise Fields, and claiming that he knew or should have known his deputy was sexually abusing women in his charge. Also alleging that there are other women who Fields has similarly abused, with it then also being reported that Steins gave a deposition in that case just days before the shooting. All that said, to be very clear, there is no evidence yet that Mullins' death is connected to the suit against Fields or Steins' alleged involvement. We are just currently trying to sift through the publicly available information to get any sort of possible idea, especially because at the hearing yesterday where Steins entered his not guilty plea, he didn't provide any more clues or information. So for now, we'll have to wait to see what comes from the investigation. And as far as what's next, I mean, there's another hearing set this coming Tuesday. And I mean, very notably here, under Kentucky law, Steins' case is eligible for the death penalty. Also, I will say, on the note of Kentucky law, Steins is technically still in office despite the murder charge and will remain in power until he resigns or gets removed by other action. And then, screen protectors on your phone, they serve a great purpose. But putting them on yourself, I mean, it could be stressful. I mean, there's nothing more annoying as bubbles you just can't get out. That is, until now, thanks to the longtime sponsor of the show, Dbrand's Prism 2.0. Y'all, it has never been easier, at least for me, right? It's an edge-to-edge scratch-resistant glass, aka it's really protective, fingerprint resistant, and apparently so easy to use that dbrand literally trademarked it as the idiot-proof screen protector, right? And dbrand as a company, they take protecting your devices seriously. One, because they care, and two, they probably don't want to deal with your bitching online, which I love. That's 2 for 2. It's why I use their phone cases. Like their premium grip, it's better than other phone cases because their grips have added textures. And in addition to those grippy microscopic ridges, they add liquid black grip strips to the sides of the grip case. And its slim design, it doesn't get in the way of you actually using it. And not that it'll happen because of the grip, but I love the military grade drop protection and the clicky buttons that are addictively fun to use. And my newest skin is the Area 51 collection, right? It actually adds 3D elements. Each of the lines on the design actually has a different height, making it tactile, right? 3D. You don't have to just take my word for it. Go to dbrand.com/PhillyD and check it out for yourself. And then we need to talk about Mary Cooper because she was on the brink of death, struggling to breathe when doctors dramatically swooped in at the last minute to save her life. But the big thing is that they did so completely against her wishes, right? She signed a do not resuscitate order, and by ignoring it, doctors put her and her family in a painful situation that they hope to avoid. And unfortunately, her story isn't some crazy one-off. Instead, it's just one of many that highlights an ongoing crisis in the medical community with confusion around DNRs that leaves doctors unclear on what's required of them and patients uncertain that their wishes are going to be respected. Because again, Cooper is just one of the many people who have tried to make their wishes on resuscitation clear. With her daughter, Sherry Uphold, telling the New York Times, "My mother's religious belief is when it is her time to go, that's God's choosing, not hers. She was very adamant about that. And so as a result, Cooper had a do not resuscitate and do not intubate order on file for decades. And then when doctors found cancer cells in her stomach last winter, she filled out new copies explicitly stating that she did not want medical staff to take measures to restart her heart if it stopped or to give her a breathing tube. And at least on the surface level, DNRs are very straightforward, where they basically say that if a person's heart stops, and in some states, if their breathing stops, medical staff shouldn't perform CPR, give medications to restart the heart, or take other resuscitative steps like intubation, ventilation, or defibrillation. But that proved to be much more complicated for Cooper when she went to the hospital in February for a stomach scope to determine how serious her cancer was. Because when Uphold went to visit her mother in the recovery room, she found her panicking, gesturing that she was unable to breathe. So Uphold called for help and was escorted into a waiting room while a medical team called an emergency code, with a medical record showing that Cooper became more distressed and uncooperative, so the medical team restrained her and inserted a breathing tube down her throat, thus saving her life while violating the explicit wishes stated in her medical chart. So Uphold, she was pissed, but when she confronted the doctors, they couldn't explain why her mother was intubated when she had made it very clear that she never wanted to be given a breathing tube. And then, when Cooper woke up, she started trying to pull at the tubes and IV lines in her body, with her motioning to her daughter and the doctors that she wanted the breathing tube removed, and Cooper herself later telling the Times, "They had me tied down. I was scared to death," with Uphold finding herself in the exact situation that she and her mother wanted to avoid, but her hands were tied, or as she told Cooper at the time, "If you take that out, you're committing suicide, and if I take it out, I'm murdering you. I won't do that." The breathing tube was then left in, and Cooper became very sick, developing pneumonia and going into septic shock. By the time that she was actually finally stable enough to have the tube removed and go home on hospice care, the sickness and intubation had left her incredibly weak, limiting her mobility. So now she deals with horrible anxiety, waking up most nights grabbing for imaginary tubes. And this is she also now needs in-house care 24/7 and is unable to bathe, dress, or cook for herself. And because her family can't afford full-time caregivers, they end up providing most of her care. And this is Cooper remains angry at the doctors who saved her life for putting her and her loved ones in this position, telling the Times, "They interfered with me and God. I was ready to go, and they took that away from me." Right, and that is exactly the sentiment that many people have when they sign DNRs. Right, the majority of patients who sign these orders are older people, and usually folks who have serious underlying medical conditions. In fact, people older than 85 are as much as 4 times more likely to have a DNR than adults under 65. But also, plenty of young, healthy people have them as well, with studies showing that between 10 and 20% of all hospitalized adults have DNRs. But again, many patients that need resuscitation are people who are already sick or frail, meaning that attempts to save them might not work. Or like we saw in Cooper's case, successful attempts can result in significantly lowered quality of life. I mean, take something as common as CPR, for example. Even when it's successful, it can cause irreversible damage because chest compressions can break the sternum and ribs or puncture the lungs. And that can prolong pain and recovery in anyone, but for people who are already sick or frail, those injuries can become insurmountable or stay with them in some form for the rest of their lives. And also, despite what we've all been led to believe from medical dramas, CPR often doesn't actually extend life in a meaningful way for many people, especially older folks. In fact, a 2021 review of global studies found that only between 11 and 28% of older patients who experience resuscitation after cardiac arrest in the hospital actually survive long enough to be discharged. And that number actually dropping to just 11% outside of a hospital setting. And then even when people do survive, they often have brain damage that can further lower their quality of life. I mean, that's exactly what happened in the case of Cliff Robson, for example, who had known for decades that he did not want to be resuscitated. But when his vital signs worsened while in the hospital preparing for a heart valve replacement, the medical team performed CPR and restarted his heart, seemingly not knowing that he had a DNR. And in this process of stabilizing his heart, Robson sustained multiple broken ribs ribs and remained unconscious afterward, with a brain scan then showing minimal activity, forcing his son to decide whether or not his father should receive a feeding tube to keep him alive. And again, Robson is not alone here. So it brings us to the million-dollar question. Why the hell does this happen to people who clearly spell out their wishes? And well, as it turns out, it actually comes down to issues with the definition of resuscitation, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Right? Because back in the 1960s, resuscitation primarily referred to CPR. But even then, according to Dr. Max Virgo, a palliative care doctor for Dartmouth Health, medical professionals considered that to be the nuclear option to bring someone back after their heart stopped. But then we saw the interpretation of the term shift drastically by the 90s, within medical literature using resuscitation as a sweeping catch-all to include tons of other medical interventions that would be used in cases that don't necessarily involve cardiac arrest, things like administering IV fluids or giving high doses of steroids for infections. With Virgo also explaining that while DNRs themselves as legal documents didn't change in scope, the liberal use of the term resuscitation created confusion, right? And that resulted in doctors administering or withholding care differently to patients with DNRs based on their own different interpretations. And in many cases, like with Cooper and Robson, that means administering resuscitation measures a patient didn't want. But also a thing is it goes the other way sometimes too, right? Sometimes doctors will withhold care permitted under DNRs like transfusions, antibiotics, or dialysis because they're confused about whether that kind of care can be given. With a 2017 survey of 553 medical residents in the US showing that a substantial portion would have made the incorrect choice to withhold necessary medical care for a DNR patient. Hell, some even believe that diagnostic tests shouldn't be ordered for DNR patients, even if that's absolutely permitted. Also, another part of this equation is that medical professionals are more likely to perform CPR if a patient goes into cardiac arrest due to a complication with treatment rather than because of underlying conditions. Or with that same survey finding that nearly 7 in 10 medical residents said they would override a DNR in case of physician error, with some physicians arguing that patients don't anticipate cardiac arrest from a course of treatment when they agree to a DNR. In fact, many doctors actually suspend DNRs for surgery so they can correct reversible problems that might crop up. And while some hospitals do have policies in place that allow doctors to address those kinds of issues without suspending a DNR, the language and interpretations of those exceptions aren't consistent, with one expert here arguing that patients should have a right to decide if they want their DNR to remain active during surgery, but also saying at the same time that doctors should have a right to say if they're not comfortable with that. Noting that, in addition to personal reservations about not wanting to operate on someone who could die a preventable death, surgical mortality rates are tracked by national data banks and can reflect poorly on both the hospital and surgeon. But oftentimes, the thing is, those conversations just don't happen. And it's the same for discussions about DNRs in general, even outside of the operating room, which can further lead to misunderstandings about what a patient wants. And then even beyond all that, there are plenty of other simpler reasons why DNRs are ignored. Doctors might just not know they exist, hard copies are easily misplaced, and information is lost during transitions of care. But regardless, right, the situation is people have DNRs violated and their families can have little legal recourse because most violations are hard to litigate, which then can also make it challenging to find a lawyer who will even consider taking the case. Now that said, numerous medical institutions are taking steps to clarify the language of do not resuscitate, with some hospitals even using the phrase do not attempt resuscitation to highlight the fact that CPR often doesn't actually revive people. Some doctors have also said that they like more explicit phrases like no CPR or terms that frame the choice as positive rather than a desire to withhold care like allow natural death. And there, it'll be interesting to see if that shift catches on at a broader scale and whether it's actually going to make a difference. But in the meantime, I'd really love to know your thoughts here, whether you've had someone that had a DNR, you have a DNR, you're someone in the medical community. Any and all thoughts and reactions to this, I'd love to hear from you in those comments down below. And then let's talk about Bad Bunny and politics, because he is now just the latest artist to get involved in politics, but not with the US presidential race. Instead, we're talking about him today because he's getting involved and vocal about Puerto Rico's gubernatorial election, with him just having bought billboards in San Juan criticizing the Progressive New Party, one of the major parties in the territory, which is pro-statehood. Right? And he shared photos of those billboards on X this week with a sign saying that a vote for the party, dubbed the PNP, is a vote for corruption and for the power company Luma Energy. Right? And that specifically is very notable because there's a lot of frustration over Puerto Rico's power grid and frequent blackouts, and it's a major political issue. Another billboard saying those who vote for PNP do not love Puerto Rico, with Bad Bunny himself writing, ad paid for by Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, a Puerto Rican who does love Puerto Rico. And even though those billboards go after one party, specifically, Bad Bunny has not endorsed a candidate yet in the race, but he has been very critical of both the PNP and the Popular Democratic Party in the past, with both those parties sharing power. And as far as where the race stands right now, polls have shown that the PNP's candidate is leading, but a third-party challenger from the Puerto Rican Independence Party has been gaining steam with young voters, with NBC News also doing a report earlier this year noting that a lot of young voters in the territory are very apathetic about politics and voting, and that this has allowed newer independent parties to pop up to get their support. Also, as far as Bad Bunny's billboards, a report from Telemundo actually claimed that the PNP filed a complaint against them, though technically the outlet didn't say that the signs in the complaint were Bad Bunny's, but the images shown were the same ones that he put up. And so as a result, you had him tweeting, "The PNP using its power to try to silence me. me. What is happening with democracy? With them then also pointing to other issues, including allegations of electoral fraud that were just published in a report from Puerto Rico's Center for Investigative Journalism. Also, I will say, if you're unfamiliar, like, this is not Bad Bunny's first rodeo. This is not his first time speaking up. I mean, just recently he released a song criticizing the Puerto Rican government response to Hurricane Maria, as well as the leadership leading up to the storm. And him getting involved is very key, because recent reports have noted that he does have major political influence in Puerto Rico, which has also led to a lot of people wondering, how much that could translate into influence in the presidential race as well. I mean, even the Washington Post doing a piece about what an endorsement could mean from him, with them specifically pointing to how Pennsylvania is home to the third largest population of Puerto Ricans outside the island. And right now, winning Latino voters over is a big hurdle for Kamala Harris, as polls have shown likely Hispanic voters don't support her as much as they supported Biden in 2020. So with that, you had one Democratic consultant telling the outlet that Bad Bunny putting his weight behind a candidate, it would be like a Thanos level event, like a snap. That's a game over moment. Though there, I would say, Bad Bunny does tend to keep his politics local to Puerto Rico. But then, taking a quick breather from the news, I gotta say congratulations to these 5 beautiful bastards, because if you haven't already, check your DMs for a $100 gift code to beautifulbastard.com. And for everyone else who didn't win, still got good news for you, because if you go over to beautifulbastard.com right now, you can get 20 to 60% off things right now. Or whether you need our core day-to-day premium essentials, our short sleeves, our long sleeves, we got a lot of colors, or maybe you want to wear your feelings with our fantastic graphic gear. Whether it be for the Bamfs out there, those who are honestly fucking killing it, those feeling barely alive, as well as our best-selling Villains line in all new colorways. And to keep it simple, the discounts are already applied, so you don't have to worry about keeping another thing in your head. So yeah, grab what you want while your size is in stock over at beautifulbastard.com right now, and it's also a great way to support the show. And then, what the actual hell is going on at OpenAI? That is what many are asking following yesterday, where several OpenAI executives announced within hours of each other that they were leaving the company. And honestly, doing so by releasing messages that felt like they were written by OpenAI. And seemingly, the one that garnered the most attention came from Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati, with a memo that she shared within the company and then later posted on X, reading, actually, I have an idea. Can you read the sentence that I'm going to send you in a second?
Sure, go ahead and send it over.
Can you read the last text I sent you?
I can't read text aloud, but I can help clarify or expand on it.
So.
Got it. If you need it,
Okay, you can turn yourself off.
I'll be right here when you're ready to chat again.
Are you still listening?
Yes, I'm still here. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay. I'll do the job. With a memo she shared within the company and then later posting on X, read it. I'm stepping away because I want to create the time and space to do my own exploration. For now, my primary focus is doing everything in my power to ensure a smooth transition, maintaining the momentum we've built. Right, and Mira has been one of the faces of the company for a while now. In fact, she was named the interim CEO during that brief ousting of CEO Sam Altman late last year. Though notably, she was also one of the hundreds of employees that threatened to quit if he wasn't reinstated. And she is widely known within the company for her hands-on work and close involvement with the development of OpenAI's core product. So her sudden departure, it's definitely going to be felt, and even more so because she's not the only one leaving. Or with the company's chief research officer, Bob McGrew, and a vice president of research, Barrett Zoff, announcing their own intentions to leave the company just hours later. With Zoff reportedly being a key researcher for OpenAI and McGrew being a project manager who helped map out strategies. And seemingly all these departures are happening as Sam Altman and others are reportedly pushing for OpenAI to become a more traditional money-making company. With Reuters reporting that the company is planning on restructuring their commercial arm into a for-profit benefit corporation that will no longer be controlled by their nonprofit board. Sources telling the Washington Post that this more typical structure will ease fundraising and employee compensation. With it also worth noting here that under this new structure, Sam Altman could reportedly be getting a nice amount of equity. Now, as far as OpenAI actually becoming a for-profit company, that likely won't happen until next year. But notably, this is also happening as they're currently in talks for a new round of investment, which could reportedly hike the company's value up as far as $150 billion, which is a big jump from the $80 billion it's at now. And reportedly among the potential investors there, you have Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, and the United Arab Emirates technology investment firm MGX. But with all this, right, you have the Washington Post reporting that Mira's decision has nothing to do with those restructuring plans, citing an anonymous source close to her. And also, in response to Mira's goodbye post on X, Sam said that Mira, McGrew, and Zoff all made their decision to leave, quote, independently of each other and amicably. And adding, leadership changes are a natural part of companies, especially companies that grow so quickly and are so demanding. I obviously won't pretend it's natural for this one to be so abrupt, but we are not a normal company. But with that, you also have plenty of people saying, these departures, they're just the latest in a long line, with OpenAI seeing many of their key players leaving the company in the last year or so. In fact, of the 13 people who helped found OpenAI back in 2015, only 3 remain, and that also doesn't touch on the other issues the company's had in the last year. Though also something that should be understood, like something might be going on behind the scenes versus the company's going under. These are not the same thing. Within the last 9 months, they've more than doubled in size and brought more seasoned executives into the fold. But for now, we'll have to wait to see what happens, especially, when they start making the change to a for-profit company. But then finally, today, let's end on a congratulations, and let's talk about yesterday. Starting with congrats to Kayla P, who's a Daily Dip newsletter subscriber and just won $1,000 in a weekly SeatGeek giveaway towards her choice of SeatGeek tickets. And there, one of Kayla's thoughts is using it for the Alabama-Auburn game. And for everyone else, that's right, SeatGeek and the Daily Dip are still giving away up to $1,000 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. You can just add code PDS to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. And $1,000 prizes are available to Daily Dip subscribers who add code PDS newsletter, doubling entries and winnings. So definitely get in. But then, regarding yesterday, let's do some commentary. And we'll start with Marcellus Williams, because that is where we had the most comments. With Raziel saying, executing a man when the key witness admits to lying and admitting they were afraid the real killer would kill them as well is truly fucked. Others saying the phrase, no evidence of his innocence, sounded weird. Is it presumption of innocence for the first trial and then presumption of guilt on appeal? And there, folks responding, appeals presume the first trial was correct. Technically, the person was already found guilty in a court of law. He was innocent until that court ruled. The only way to appeal is to prove that the court was wrong, and it's a really high bar. Not saying it's fair or okay, but that's the system. But then separately, there was also a lot of conversation around Chappell Roan. And here we saw a lot of different takes. Eldridge saying, for her own sake, someone has to be on Chappell's side, telling her to take a break from the internet sometimes. People on the internet are going to decide whatever they want, going to think what they want, and they'll never know your heart. Arguing with the internet is just not good for her peace and never will be. Though Gabby is saying she's clarifying her statement because people cannot help but to put words into her mouth. I don't consider this arguing with the internet. Maria is saying, kind of feel like Chappell Roan is going to have a breakdown if she's always feeling forced to reply to stuff like this. Others saying Chappell saying an endorsement and vote aren't the same thing basically completely describes how I feel about it too, to be honest, as someone pretty far to the left. I'm going to vote for Kamala, but there are key issues for her that I take real issue with, like immigration and Gaza. I think critiquing our leaders is very important, even if there's someone I really support. If they do something horrible that I disagree with, I'm gonna call that out. If I were in Chappell's place right now, I'd be saying the same thing. But yeah, personally, just with everything involving that story, I found myself exhausted. Well, I personally did not care what Chappell Roan was gonna do. I understand why people were asking for her to clarify, because there are a number of people that are like, no, fuck Trump, and I don't like Kamala, so I'm not voting, or I'm voting third party. And the end result of that is drastically different than I'm not a fan of either, but I'm gonna vote for Kamala. I mean, all you have to do is look back to 2016 to see the impact of complete apathy or the third-party protest vote, because you think both sides are equally bad. On some issues, yeah. On everything, no. That election and the Supreme Court justices that came with it, that is affecting the next however many decades of this country. Rights got stripped away from millions of women, and it feels like there's a new crazy thing every month. But I don't know, man, just bringing it back to Chappell, watching her deal with fame stresses me out, and I'm not fucking involved in any way. Like seeing her perform in front of these massive crowds, I'm like, man, that would be awesome. And then everything else that I see from her, I'm like, I would not even want an ounce of that level of fame. Ugh. But that's the end of today's show. Thank you so much for watching. For more news that YouTube thinks you're interested in, you can click or tap right here. Also, if you want to get a fantastic deal on one of the best shirts you'll ever wear in your entire life, you can click right here, get something over at beautifulbastard.com. It also helps support the show. Thanks again. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.